John, take us back to the beginning. How did the cooking and eating look like when you were
Uh,
growing up?
I'm very fortunate. My mother is a phenomenal cook, and she'll be happy to see this. But I would say the first some of my earliest memories are cooking with my mother, and my mother had a passion for cooking. I grew up in and was born in Berkeley, California, and we had so many so much wonderful produce, dairy farms, so much local meat around. And there was a huge movement before I was even born to have high quality ingredients and work with high quality products. There was a woman called Ellis Waters who kind of really moved this or started this movement where I grew up. So this was kind of all around me. And I had a passion for food, and it was a very exciting time. I was born in 93. So there was a lot of things happening culinary wise in the Bay Area, which is the San Francisco Bay Area. And so it started with that. And I did construction with my father. I didn't know actually I was going to get into cooking and get into restaurants and hospitality. But I started with that, and then I reached a point where I was going to go work with my cousin who owned a number of restaurants in Denver, Colorado. And she's a restaurateur, and she worked for, a good amount of chefs over the years. And she's very, very well accomplished. And so food was a kind of always around me. And she really encouraged me to get into that industry. But she said it was very difficult, of course, in the kitchens. And she said it was, it's a tough life. And she said, you got to be really serious about it if you want to get into this industry. So I was, in my early teens, and I was like, well, okay, I want to kind of figure it out. And I thought construction was the kind of the big, that's what my family has done for a long, long time. But then the construction industry, because of the 2008 housing crisis, the construction industry really had some big changes, and it was very difficult for my family and many other families. And I think the whole world felt the 2008
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
crisis. And so I was like, I got to go to school and I got to figure this out, just like everybody does. I got to go to college and everything. So, later I was like, I'm not going to do cooking. I'm going to become, I'm going to get into some business thing or whatever. And I'm not going to do construction either. So I ended up moving to Santa Barbara, and that was 2014, I believe.
Yeah.
Thereabouts. And I started going to college there. And Santa Barbara is really interesting. You have been there,
Yeah.
and it is a really small town, and it is mainly a hospitality and tourist destination. I believe there's a population of around 100,000, and it has around 7 million tourists that go through there. I believe thereabouts, but it's a lot of people that pass through there. So it's basically built on tourism and hospitality, the whole town. And I didn't really want to get into hospitality because I was still like, no, I want to do something else. I was going through college, and I actually met this wonderful girl, and her name was Emma, and we really hit it off. She was from Sweden.
Mhm.
She was from Helsingborg, and we had a great time. We really had a connection, and one thing led to another, and we got married. And it's my wife today, and super happy decision. And it was really funny because when you get married to someone, and she was in the process of becoming a citizen, you have to be able to provide enough income to be able to support both your spouse.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to need like a job. Up until that point, I was doing like a little bit of construction, a little odd jobs. Sometimes I do a little bit of catering, something like that.
Mm.
I could, you know, but I actually needed a job with like a pay slip and to show, the government, hey, I first started out as a dishwasher, and I started, washing dishes in the kitchen, and I showed that I do my way around a kitchen, and I really because I had experience beforehand in kitchens and stuff like that with odd jobs and just doing stuff, and so showed myself that I could, you know, hold my own weight, and then pretty soon I got promoted to line cook and stuff like that, and doing that. And so I working in that industry and I worked at a number of restaurants. And this lasted for a number of years. And then I realized I kind of hit a wall because things started also getting quite expensive. And at the same time, I'm going to college. And I realized that I needed to pivot because the amount of time that I was spending in the kitchen, I was not able to go to school. I was not able to, spend as much time with my wife as I wanted to. And I was like, what is like, I'm going down a path I don't really want to go down. And I was like, how am I going to? So I, was like trying to figure it out. And, this is a multiple year process of realization and then trying to figure out a plan and then like saying, oh yeah, I'm going to figure something out and then trying to like figure something out and it actually coming. So I'm still working in kitchens and stuff. And a really good friend was like, hey, why don't you consider going into a different form of hospitality? Why don't you consider going into more of working in resorts? And so I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Resorts, and there are some beautiful high end resorts in Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that sounds awesome. So he got me an interview and I ended up, getting the job, which was awesome. And then after working there for a while, I felt like I was missing something because I wanted to explore more out of the kitchen. I found myself asking more questions, kind of because I've always had this mentality about asking questions and stuff. And I kind of had a passion about seeing what's on the other side of that door. Because when you're a chef and you're in the kitchen or in a cook or whatever, I just had this interest. What goes on the other side of the door? Like sometimes you're working in a basement. It can and you're like, what's the
You wanna
goose?
see a secret.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like the servers are coming in. Oh, I need this. I need this. And so an opportunity presented itself for me to become a busser. And so then I became a busser and then I would also help out in kitchens, just kind of I've always been a guy who kind of did like to do everything type thing because I find that really interesting. And so I was able to do that. And then I became a server and then I became a bartender and then, developed a really big fascination with wines and so on. And then I moved to another place and just kind of this continued to progress.
Mm.
And the last place I worked was awesome because we got to open a resort from I was part of the opening crew from scratch. So we saw this place when it was just there was no grass, it was all dirt. And we were part of the opening team. We got trained. It was a wonderful experience. And then we went to a point where we opened. And when you open a resort, this was like 164 rooms and you're open and you do so many things wrong and stuff and you learn from your mistakes and you fix it and it's awesome and it's like such a big awesome learning experience and so exciting and it's really rewarding because
Mhm.
you feel like oh, wow I contributed to this place this part and we opened and the executive chef there had a vision of getting a Michelin star and so he pushed the team of this and it took years and COVID happened and we had setbacks back and forth. And then we finally achieved that goal. And it was very, very rewarding to be part of that team, to be able to, just a small part of that team that
Mm.
was achieve that goal and that vision. And then, you reach a point where you're like, well, you got to have kids, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So me and my wife, we had our first and then we realized that a lot of the infrastructure and everything there it just really was very difficult to be a working class family and have a newborn and with the various your hours of working and stuff like that and and we're like wow and this is like during and right after COVID
Yeah.
kind of it's still going on. This is like
Mm.
2021, 2022, and then housing became a very just crazy in California. It just got
Way too
it got
expensive.
yeah, yeah. And so it's like we can't really, raise a child and it's difficult to find a rental, let alone buying a house is out of the question.
Yeah. But did you ever consider, like, moving to another state or
We did, we did.
yeah.
We talked about Texas, we talked about yeah, moving to multiple states and stuff
Mm.
like that. But no, it just didn't feel Right. I love the beach. I love being by the ocean. Something my wife loves. She loves being with nature, around nature.
Mm,
And she didn't want to go from your car, your house that is AC to your car, which is AC, and then just drive somewhere and then go to another place that's AC. It's very compartmentalized type thing.
mm,
And we want to go hiking in forests and something like that, or and stuff like that. And having being surrounded by nature is something that has always been very important to us. We just couldn't find something that could really, something that really sparked our interest. And during that time period, we had visited Sweden multiple times. Of course, she would go back every year, and I
mm,
would join her. And before and after we had our child, and I fell in love with it. I was walking around, and it was so tranquil and it was so beautiful here, and the culture's very relaxed, and I just really fell in love with it. I was like, wow. And there were so many interesting things, and yeah, it just fascinated me. And it reached a point where we like started talking about it, and we were like, well, what about if we moved to Sweden, with yeah. And she was like, and she reached a point in her life because she never thought she would come back to Sweden.
okay.
You know, she went to she was in college. She went to she did the semester abroad, and then she fell in love with California. And she's like, I think a lot of Swedish young people go through this. They're like, oh yeah, I'm not going back to Sweden, whatever. And then you reach a point in your life where you kind of miss those things that you grew up with. You miss the bakery that you used to go to all the time with your parents. And then you miss maybe, the ease of, booking a doctor's appointment. You miss these things that you had, but maybe you didn't realize like the significance of it because you grew up with them. And as you start to have a family, or as you start to get older, you start to appreciate more of this structure. And so she was like, I would like to move back. And
Okay.
I was like, I love what I've seen so far. Yeah, let's do it. I was really excited about it. And so had that goal, and slowly one thing led to another. And pretty soon we had sold everything that we had. And, this is something we had, basically maybe we had been married for around 8 years at that point. So we had, had all this, the whole life together for 8 years. And we started to, we moved here with two children, and we had two suitcases each. So because my daughter was one or less than she was like maybe 9 months at the time. She was very young when we first moved here. And that was kind of a big tipping point about because we wanted to have another child. And we realized maybe we could squeak by in California with one, but if we wanted to have more children, we couldn't live it just wouldn't be, yeah, we couldn't do it. We looked for apartments and stuff like that. So that was kind of like the second child was kind of the like we gotta go, we gotta move,
Oh, the whole child thing that made you, yeah, we have to do this. We can't stay
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah.
No, we can't facilitate. Yeah, we can't give our children the life we feel they deserve. We would have, yeah, it would either require us to work so much that one of us would never see them,
Mm,
or we would have to move to an area that none of us really clicked for us. So it was like, let's move to across the world on the other side of the planet. Let's go. So it was, but I mean, it was so awesome. So we moved here. Each of us had two bags. So my 9-month-old had two bags. I had two bags. My wife, my son, and we got here, and we were able to stay with my father and mother-in-law for a while. They're the most wonderful in-laws
mm,
you could ever ask for. They're the sweetest, kindest people, and they've always. And at this point too, I will say her mother was like laying seeds for her to like come back. She was like always like, yeah, maybe Sweden's pretty nice. It's a good place. Like,
mhm,
check this out, check this place out, or like whatever. And she actually was the reason why I was able to get work here. So
okay.
a friend of a friend was a chef, and he was looking for a cook, and we communicated over Facebook Messenger, and he said, "Come in for an interview when you get here." And I was like, "Okay." And when you message someone online, you know how it is. You don't expect anything to come from it, you
It
know?
can go anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, and this guy was like, "Yeah, things seem pretty good, man. And, I really like your resume, like, and stuff, your experience. And I'd love to meet with you. And let's meet up when you get here." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, man. Cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah."
Mm.
And so one thing leads to another. We arrive in Sweden. The next day, I have my job interview. I am extremely jet lagged, and I somehow passed the interview, which is great. And I find myself working the third day I'm in Sweden, and now in retrospect, I realize how fortunate I was, because it is very difficult to get work here. And very grateful for the opportunity that he gave me. And
Yeah.
in life, it's really interesting. You realize there are those little moments in life where either a yes or no can really change everything in your future. And sometimes a yes or a no can just completely, it can either hinder you or it can just push you forward. And this was one of those things that allowed me to just start a life here and be able to take care of my family and everything. And all I wanted to do was just get a
Yeah.
job, work. I didn't care what I did. I was like, I'll sweep floors. Do whatever you want me to do. You tell me
Whatever
to
it takes.
jump. Yeah, you tell me to jump. I'll say how high. And so it was really rewarding. And then I got into a completely new kitchen environment.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, of course, kitchens are the same, but where I live in Skåne, we have a lot of traditional cultural dishes here, as I'm learning about. I
Mhm.
continue to find out about. And certain meals are lunch, very important. The type of food you serve for lunch. And people are used to eating certain things. And so this is a brand new experience for me. And I really dove like headfirst into trying to learn, what this stuff was. Like gräddsås, gräddsås, for
Mm.
instance. We call that gravy, but gravy's not really the same thing. And then you learn, okay, you need to put a little bit of jelly in it. You add a little bit of sweetness to it, and then making something like the pan beef, and then you're making, cure pudding and all this. This
Yeah.
stuff is similar flavors, and there's a lot of things that the US has that are very similar. And I think a lot of Swedish immigrants, Norwegian immigrants, Finnish immigrants brought those to the United States, but there's no direct, like, there's things like meatloaf is extremely popular here. It's like, awesome. They got meatloaf. And, it's like, oh, yeah, I know how to make that or something. But then there are certain things that are very specific. And if you do something like if you serve, for instance, meatballs, I'm used to meatballs being with spaghetti,
Mm.
classic. It's Italian American. I'm not Italian American, but the culture of spaghetti and meatballs is very strong. My aunt used to make spaghetti and meatballs, and my wife was the one who introduced me to Swedish meatballs. And the things that you serve with that are very specific. And there are things as an outsider you might take for granted. And people, like, if you forget serving lingon or pressgurka with Swedish meatballs, people will be like, "What's going on, man?" So I had to learn these little things. They're little details that tie everything together,
Mm.
and to be able to figure out what things need to be on a plate, on a Swedish plate for someone, and what things do not
Mm.
need, what things are socially acceptable, I would say, in a kitchen. And then also what was really big for me is finding out the original, because when it comes to cooking, if you find out the original recipe or the original way the dish was constructed, then you're able to say, okay, this is how it's made. Then I can kind of take these liberties with the dish to add my own particular flair to the dish. But if you start out with it's like making a copy of a copy. So every chef adds their own particular flair to it. So if I take a chef that works here, his particular thing, and then I add on to it my own thing, that might be a bridge too far. A
Mhm.
sense, and it's tricky. So you don't know. And in cooking, you're always kind of pushing the envelope and seeing
Also okay.
yeah, what's okay. But if you start out, you got to start with a foundation. So building this foundation was very important to me. So that's why I really my mother-in-law has a lot of wonderful old cookbooks, and so I was able to go through so many of those. I was able to look up so much online, of course, and be able to like, what is the original of this, and then go from there. And it's everything. So it's like you're starting from square one, and it's been so much fun. And I feel for like I've been here for 3 years, but I've been studying for like 3 years here these dishes and and that's just my work, figuring out how to getting a Swedish driver's license, figuring out how to book an appointment for a doctor, figuring out all this, and even setting all that up has been an adventure for me. I always joke around like every time I open the door and step outside, it's like an adventure for me because it is.
Speaking of adventure, how would you describe your personal cooking philosophy?
My personal cooking philosophy. Well, my personal cooking philosophy is not, it's family. It's
Yes.
making you feel like family. And I don't really care about if the dish is particularly correct. It is very much making you feel comfortable and what you want to eat. It's making you feel at home, I would
Mm,
say. So I have a very, some people are very like, this is my food, you're going to eat it or you're going to get out. And I've worked with people like that and
mm,
I understand it too. But I don't feel that I don't feel that I'm ever in the position to dictate what people want or should and shouldn't eat and how they should eat it. And so I would say it's about family. I want to treat you like you're my friend. You came into my home and I want to be able to feed you and make you happy. And ideally, I would like to trigger a sense of nostalgia.
mm,
So I'd like, because food is so much more than what you're eating. It takes you back. Is this food something my grandmother used to make, my mother used to make? And if you as a chef can elicit that feeling in someone, you've done something magical because someone will it'll transcend the dining experience. And that's what I strive to do. And that's why I wanted to learn these foundational ways of Swedish cooking because you can't do that coming as an outsider. And I've worked with people that were outsiders coming to Santa Barbara and they thought that they knew. I had seen this many times and in the Bay Area as well. And it's an outsider coming in and they're saying, no, you don't know how to eat. This is the way you should eat. And I'm going to show you how to eat properly. That shuts people off. That shuts people down. And every time I've seen this happen, it was detrimental to the operation. Then eventually they had to pivot. And then sometimes it was too late for them to be able to switch and start accepting because you've already turned people, oh, we don't want to go there because that person they just tell us what to eat. And I grew up in an area where people were very particular about their diets and what they wanted to eat, how much salt was in their food, how much carbohydrates. I grew up an hour from I mean, I did not grew up. I worked an hour from LA. We have a lot of in Los Angeles, there's a lot of particular dietary restrictions. And in Santa Barbara had a completely different way of eating. And if you go to the Bay Area, it has a completely different way of eating. And the same thing applies in Sweden. I feel like everyone has their own certain taste and what they want out of a dish. And so it's trying to figure that out, I would say.
mm.
I hope that answers your question a very
Yeah, I'm thinking, if you think about all the restaurants that you worked in, all the homes you've been to, and observed how people cook and eat everything. If I'm a person that doesn't have the biggest cooking experience
yeah.
and want to make like average day cooking a little bit easier, a little bit better for myself, what would be your few simple tips that I could add a little more flavor to my daily cooking or make it a little more easier?
I would I would say you remove as many components, and this actually regard is in regards to I think everything in life. If you look at people that are engineers, they first come up with an idea and then they remove all excess from it. So you say, what do I want out of a meal? What are either my nutritional goals, my flavor? What do I want? Do I want spicy? Do I want sweet? Do I want savory? And then do I want protein? Do I want, whatever?
Mm,
And then you can strip it down to its most basic element. So what is on the plate. Pasta is a great I grew up and I was really fortunate and I worked with many great yeah, I worked with great chefs and a lot of them were from Italy and Italian cooking is awesome in that regards because you can have if you look at old school like Italian cooking, there's only a few components. Like if you take cacio e pepe, for instance, it just has pecorino romano, pasta water, cracked pepper, and of course pasta. And that dish tastes phenomenal. And so, but it's stripped away from all the you can add and then but so if you take something down, ketchup pepe can be very difficult to make because you have to balance this when you're cooking it so you don't overheat it and it doesn't coagulate. It's not easy. But if you remove all the excess and then just start with the foundation, the most simplified version of that dish or whatever that you want, then you can add to it. And I think people get very overwhelmed when they cook because they start with a recipe that's been added on. So a recipe that was you had a certain dish and then someone added on to that and added on to that and added on to that. And then it becomes very complicated. Then people get overwhelmed and they don't even want to make it. But if you start at kind of the origin and the original, foundation of that dish, it's very easy. And then you're like, I want a little bit of this. And so I'll add it to that. And and then you can go from there. But I would say start super easy and find, the most basic version of it and then add on.
And being in Sweden for a few years now, what has been what would you say has been the most different or most surprising thing you've learned so far about the palate or Swedish food?
Well, there's a number of things that I've discovered. The Swedish food, from what I've observed, tends to have a little bit more salt in the preparation. It is not over salted at all, but finishing with salt is yeah, that is quite interesting to me. And actually, that was one of the first critiques I got from my chef when I first moved here was that my dishes were very good, but I needed to use more salt. And I found that very surprising because I lived in an area, Santa Barbara in particular, is very salt sensitive. So you don't want to add any salt. People were saying your pasta was too salty because you added a little bit of salt to the water. So people have a very high like sensitivity to salt. Coming here, I was able to be more liberal with salt and actually salt food the way it should be salted. And so that was, or not the way it should be salted, but it was very good, And so that was really interesting. Also, I would say in regards to sweetness as well, I discovered that my palate was geared way more towards things that were sweeter just because where I had come from and where I grew up. Also, having sweeter things for breakfast, starting off the morning with a donut or something like that. I'm not saying Swedish people don't do that, but from what I've seen and from what I've of the feedback that I've gotten, it tends to be more of an afternoon thing, and for fika.
Yeah.
And so that was very interesting to me, kind of realizing, dialing back some of the frostings that I make, like cream cheese frosting on cinnamon rolls. That's awesome. Some people start their day with that and having that. But here it's like, yeah, some people, but I would say the majority, and unfortunately, I work at a place where we do large conferences and stuff. So I'm also able to play around and see what people like. So I'm able to see, and fortunately I have bosses that allow me that freedom and where I'm able to see, okay, I want to try this and I'll have a conference. And so, sometimes we have 80, 100 people, 150 people, and we're able to provide, and I'm able to see, do people like this? Do people like that? And, just play around with it a little bit. But I would say the sweetness, things do not tend to be as sweet in Sweden. Of course, it's more balanced in regards to sugar, which is great, more healthy for you, which is awesome. And I would say also the use of flour and high quality flour in Sweden and high quality bread is such a staple here. You can go, I don't know if you observe this in your travels in the United States, but you can go in areas in the United States and you can't get a good piece of bread. And then you can go to communities that have really good bread as well if you go to certain areas. And so, but I would say it's more of there's usually, I haven't been everywhere in Sweden, but the bread is very high quality here and people want good bread and they almost demand it. No, but it's so that the appreciation, I would say,
Mm.
for high quality bread is very important here. And yeah, those are some of the big things that have stood out to me. And also the high quality, the dairy is very interesting, and the history of dairy in Sweden, and also the quality of the dairy here, I find is very high in comparison to the price that you would pay. And yeah, it's very, very cool. And I'm really, yeah, I find it fascinating. Yeah.
And speaking of observing things, I found your material on Instagram, and you have a lot of
Yeah.
videos there where we talk about the all the various things you found in Sweden that intrigues you, and particularly that one. Was it like a spontaneous reason you started making TikTok and Instagram videos to like keep connection with home, or just more like a out of a curiosity thing?
Yeah. So I had, this happened. I was going to, I started in Sweden working at a place and worked there for over a year.
Hmm.
And then I had left and I was working at another great place. And I learned a lot of classic Swedish cooking because this place has been open since, in one part or another, it had been serving food since the 1400s, I believe. It used to be a stagecoach stop and stuff. And so I learned a lot of things. And but then the time and the commute and everything, I just wasn't able to facilitate. And so I ended up returning to my old job. And I found myself having a little bit more time, but I also found myself kind of having just more questions about, yeah, I still had a lot of questions about the origins and the reasons why. And I felt that I couldn't really, I wanted to I wanted to I was wondering if there were answers for it, and I was I was wondering, do people think about this too? Is this something that is this something that, people actually notice? Is this something that is, yeah, so I was like, I need to do that, and, also, I realized that it is no as a chef and as a restaurant, you have to have some presence on social media. People want to know the person making their food. They want to know, they want to have a face. They don't want to just see like a picture of a dish. People are, and it's becoming part of service now. It's becoming part of the hospitality industry. You have to show what you're doing. You have to let people maybe meet the team. And I would say in the US right now, it is actually more so. When I left 3 years ago, it was a really, really big deal there.
Hmm.
But then I moved here and I would say it wasn't as, it was still around, but I would say social media definitely is different in the United States than it is in Sweden. And social media, I mean, everyone's on social media, everyone's selling something, everyone's doing something, everyone's filming their lives all day long. I would walk up to the host stand. I got the two hostesses. They're doing their live streaming at the host stand. You know, it's like, and I'm like, what do you guys? Oh, we're just like live streaming. We're bored. And I know that happens here, but it seemed even in these 3 years, it started changing in Sweden, and I started noticing this kind of development of social media, kind of the same way it had in the U.S. And I was like, oh, it's starting to shift here. The Sweden is starting to have some of it's becoming an important part of restaurants here, an important part of service here.
Hmm.
People also want this in a different way. I'm not saying it's the same social media or anything, but they want that, something like that. So I was like, man, I need to push myself. And I was very nervous in front of the camera, talking to the camera. Just like anyone, I hate the way I look on the camera and stuff like that. But I like to push myself. I like to push myself in everything that I do. I like to push myself in work and to learn new things. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just do it. And I'm gonna just see what this is all about. And I'm gonna just try asking people and talking to people. And I was like, the only reason why I would I'm not going to do it is just because I'm nervous about it. I'm going to be bullied or whatever. And I was like, you know what? I reach a point, and I'm a type of person. I reach a point where I just get fed up with myself and myself making excuses where I'm like, this is enough. So I started doing it. And I was like walking home and I started, yeah, doing stuff. And it was like, thought at first social media was like only a thing where you'd post like reels or not reels, but like dances or like I didn't think there was I didn't think you could do anything of real depth
Hmm.
actually on these platforms.
Nothing more serious.
Yeah, nothing more serious. And YouTube, of course, I do that, but I didn't as I didn't have the time to be able to facilitate doing YouTube long content. You yourself know
Mm.
it's a lot, and I just don't have the time, and I don't have the facility or anything like that to be able to do that. So I was like, well, I could try short form content. And so I started doing it, and I started realizing, wow, you can actually do ask meaningful questions on this. And I really find it interesting because these algorithms and everything like that, they actually, you create your own little ecosystem, and it can be very harmful because you can, whatever you want to find, you can kind of find. So if you want to be in a negative space, you can be in a negative space, but you can also be in a positive space as well, and it can facilitate that positive kind of ecosystem. And I was really surprised at that. I didn't realize because I'm like, you hear so much about social media, it's just everything like that. So I was able to kind of utilize this as a tool to be able to ask questions to people that are all over about what they feel and what do they think about these dishes and everything. And it's been so educational to me. And the fact that so many Swedish people find it interesting and would like to contribute to the space, because I don't think it's not like listen to me talk. I don't want to be like, I'm going to show you this recipe. Let me show you how to cook. I don't want to be like that. I just wanted to kind of host a space where people could tell me, what they find interesting in regards to a certain dish, or, what does it mean to them? And it's almost like a video is kind of a topic for people to say what that particular dish means to them, or that particular thing means to them.
You
And
want
so
to
I,
interact more with them.
because it's education for me,
Okay.
because it's helping me figure out Swedish culture. And it's been one of the best teaching tools for me to learn about Sweden. And I feel I've been able to learn a lot about Sweden very quickly because of that. And I really am grateful to that. I'm really grateful for people contributed and wanting to listen to me rambling on and butchering Swedish. But no, it's great, man. It's been a phenomenal. And there's always something that, because I love to explore the meaning behind an object, whatever that is. And it's really interesting. It's
Spending
almost it's endless.
Understand. You're spending a few years in Sweden now. If I'm a person or a couple in the same situation you were a few years ago, what advice would you give to a person or a couple in the same situation you were thinking about moving or want to come to Sweden? What advice would you give them?
I would say try to have a job before you move here, definitely,
Mm.
because I feel like it's a different structure of work. That is one of the things that I've realized it can be difficult to get work here. Even my wife, it's difficult for her, and she's from Sweden and everything. And I would say that get your driver's license as soon as you can if you're not from an EU country. The driver's license will take longer than
Mm.
you think to get, because that was one of the biggest things. And I had been driving for since I was like 16 years old, and then I could drive for a year here, and then I had to get my license, and I was like, I can get my license, whatever. But it was a humbling experience getting my license. It was a lot of fun though. I was in a car and I got to talk to someone for like a couple days a week, and they couldn't go anywhere. It's poor people. But yeah, it's a beautiful Sweden's a beautiful country, and its culture is so deep and diverse. And yeah, it's so difficult. But I would say, being able to find employment is extremely be able to work and provide yourself is extremely important, and it might take longer than you think. And they're just getting everything set up. And Sweden is it has a process to doing stuff, and you have to kind of do things in the right order. You can't go from, A to Z. You got to go boom, 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 boom,
By the
get
book.
everything lined up. Yeah, very by the book. And the great thing that I love about Sweden is they give you a lot of latitude in regards. No one is behind you over your shoulder being like, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. There's a lot of honor system and trust here. You go to the grocery stores. The grocery stores, you got self checkout. I go around the grocery store. I got my little checkout
Yes,
gun and
scanner.
everything like that. Yeah, self scanning. That doesn't exist there might be some places, but that was completely new to me. And that's awesome. And I love that freedom. And I love how quickly or how efficient it is. But yeah, so there's a lot of trust involved. And I really love that aspect. And I'm a type of person that's like, when someone gives me that trust, I don't want to betray the trust, because I find that No, it means a lot to me. Trust means a lot to me because where I grew up, trust was not given, it was earned. That was a very big that was a kind of a big mentality that I grew up with. I don't know where I learned that, but it was just kind of like that's the thing, trust isn't given, it's earned. But to be in a place where it's like very trusting and it's like you don't I'm a person who's like, yeah, I want to do everything by the book. And it's like I really respect that. And I don't want to trape or like encroach or somehow mess up, And no, I really respect that about Swedish culture so much. It's very cool.
You've been here for a few years now, and is there anything you do miss or don't miss about home?
I would say thing I miss about home is the people, of
Mm,
course. My mother and father are still there. I miss them. They do visit occasionally. I miss, my friends, of course, that I developed a network of people. I was very well connected. I'm not bragging on myself, but I was connected. When you live in a place long enough, you form connections, especially in the restaurant circle. It's very, or I think any industry, it's very tight knit. And so,
mm,
people to be able to walk in and it's like, I know you, or I know your friend or something. So you develop that. And I had developed that in the Bay Area and then moved and then developed that in Santa Barbara and then to move to a new country and then develop that again,
mm.
that takes time. It might even take a little bit more time in Sweden because of, the culture. People are not as, I think Californians might tend to be a little bit more chatty or like, oh, hey, what are you doing here? Cool. Let's like hang out this weekend.
But more extrovert.
More.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit more. And, so I would say that aspect is interesting. But I would say Sweden in regards, my family is here, my children, my beautiful children and my wonderful wife. So I mean, that's where, home is where my family is. And being able to see them, my kids just blossom here and, they love school and I walk from my house and I can walk them to school and they're on their little bikes and then they're developing friends here and it's relatively safe from where I was and much safer from where I grew up. And to be able to, I mean, I moved there for my children. So yeah, to me, I don't really think about like, oh, I would wish I could go home or like, this feels like home to me and I'm very happy that I've been allowed up till this point to be able to make it my home, and I feel very happy about it. And it's of course there are little things. You could say, "Oh, I miss the beaches" or whatever. But yeah, there are beautiful beaches here too. But it's like you realize that that was a chapter of your life as well. And so I think it's like you go through phases in your life and chapters in your life, and you realize I did that. I was
Mm.
there. I appreciated it, and I had the most of it. And it does feel like a chapter in my life that is closed essentially, or it is. It's and so off to new things, kind of learning new things, exploring new things. And there's so many things I want to explore here, so many places I want to explore in Sweden. And to me, that's exciting. Learning to me is the ultimate goal, that I can do on this earth. So it's fun to be in a place that offers so many things that are new to me.
A hypothetical
Yeah.
scenario. You you said earlier you moved to Sweden for a better life for your kids. Imagine you're in the future. Your kids are all grown up. They're all moved out. Would you then consider maybe moving back, or would you still stay in Sweden?
Definitely in Sweden.
In
Yeah.
Sweden.
Yeah. No, I find, there's so many things, there's so many questions that I have that I haven't gotten the answer to. And there's so many places. And it's so, yeah, there's so much history here. And this is just one country. Then you can go to Norway. Then you can go to Finland. You can go to Denmark. You can go to Germany as well. Germany's not that far from me. And it's like, these are also places that have a whole other culture, a whole other history. And I want to know about that too. And of course, I won't be able to do, of course, I'll be able to travel and stuff, but there's so many questions that I find really, there's so many things that I find fascinating about like I feel like a kid in a candy shop when it comes to food. I really want to explore so much, and I feel like I you don't really have that ability in the United States because you're going to a different state. You're going from California to Nevada. You're going from California to Texas, and there are big cultural differences there, and there's fascinating food and stuff like that. But I feel that there's so much of a contrast here. There's almost way more of yeah. There's a very large contrast, and I find that really interesting in regards to yeah in regards to food. It's really as a chef, it's just like it's like awesome.
Looking back at your career and life, do you ever regret not becoming a chef earlier?
No, no, I really because I've learned so much. Yeah, no, I really think that everything that I couldn't really trace it back to making a single decision that, wow, I wish I would have gotten in this industry sooner, or oh, I wish I would have. I really like kind of the different phases that I've went through in life, and I've learned a lot of things through
Mm.
life, that have really benefited me because I've done a lot of different things, and those things have actually I've been able to pivot because I thought, for instance, I thought, oh, construction is going to be a great thing for me. I'm going to be in construction. Then I pivoted from construction into, the kitchen. And then I moved from the kitchen into the front of house and operations like that in hospitality and resorts and stuff like that. But I was able to fall back on my cooking background in Sweden and be able to work here because so it was an and actually I had another fortunately this first interview, but I had another interview with someone here that in the construction field. So it was either I was gonna go into the restaurant field or the construction field in Sweden. Unfortunately, this first interview ended up working out and I ended up getting a job, but or else I was good to go and do that. So having that diversity has really helped me in my life, being able to, wear a bunch of different hats, so to speak. So
All right. If I live in the States and I'm listening to this or watching this right now, what Swedish dish would you recommend they have to try if they come to Sweden?
so I would say I don't want to say meatballs because that's too just like generic. I would say you should try like a kjol is
Mm?
phenomenal, which is like ground blonfos, like ground pork and beef stuffed into cabbage. It's magical. A kjol pudding, which is kind of the same thing, but made in a sheet pan, is really delicious. It's like fläskpan, but it's particular to Skåne. It is
Munk?
not ragmunk. It's almost like a Dutch baby. So you put it in a frying pan and you bake it in the oven. But it's phenomenal. It's very similar to flesh. It's similar to flesh pancakka, but in the US, they would know it as like a Dutch baby with thick cut bacon over the top. And that is phenomenal with a little bit of apple. And it's magical. But yeah, I mean, anything here. But I would say the first thing that they should do is run to a bakery and try all the different buns and stuff like that. Yeah,
And what would you say you miss in society today that you would like to see more?
the love your neighbor. I don't know. We could always use more love in the world, right?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, a sense of like, I don't know. Yeah, I would say definitely a sense of community. And yeah, I would say the world definitely needs more love. I don't think you could ever have too much love. Yeah. More love for your neighbor.
Totally
Yeah.
understandable.
Yeah.
You've talked a lot about how your cooking for passion came from, your transition from construction to cooking, and what made you come to Sweden. Any more life advice?
Yeah. There's this quote Anthony Bourdain said, and it has always stuck with me. Anthony Bourdain was a phenomenal chef, and the way he looked at life and the way he was able to use food to be able to talk about other things, where he was able to use food as a bridge to talk about cultural and societal things is very inspirational to me. And I've always loved that. And I think so many people do as well. But he said it would be travel as much as you can, anywhere and as far as you can. And I that really stuck with me, and that is kind of the mentality. That's why I'm here as well in Sweden, because you learn so much. You learn things about other cultures, but more importantly, you learn things about yourself because you learn how you react to being in a different society and culture. And it really makes you question the things that you grew up with that you considered normal. It brings some of those things into question because you kind of realize, well, no, this is just kind of the way I grew up and what I was taught. And then it causes you to reflect and be like, well, why was I actually taught those things? Because everybody thinks, oh, yeah, this is just normal because that's where you grew up with. But traveling and working with other people from different cultures, in different places, really kind of puts a mirror to yourself and makes you, or yeah, it makes me at least very retrospective and being like, wow, this is interesting why I used to do these things, why I used to look at things this way. And to me, it really helps me grow as a individual, as a father and a husband. So yeah, that's one piece of advice I could give. That would be that, I guess.
Cool advice. And yeah, people should really travel more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we spoke about your videos before and your all these reels you make. Where can the
Yeah.
audience follow you?
It's You can follow me on TikTok and you can follow me on Instagram. It's the Lost Chef in Sweden. Yeah, find me there asking people all sorts of questions on all sorts of things.
John, thanks a lot for sharing us your story and your thoughts on cooking and life in general. And
Yeah,
we wish you all the best.
yeah. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, and take care and have a nice summer in Sweden.
Yeah, you as well.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care.